I never believed revenge could taste sweet, bittersweet maybe. The kind of flavor that lingers on your tongue long after you swallow it. But the day I finally settled the score with my former boss, I learned that some debts demand to be paid, even if you have to drag them out of the dark yourself. Before I dive in, I need to make something clear. I didn't set out to ruin anyone's life. I'm not a villain. I'm not a hero either. I'm just the kind of person who refuses to stay buried once someone tries to shovel dirt over me. 3 years ago, I worked at a small consulting firm, one of those places with motivational posters on the walls, a ping pong table no one used, and a boss who thought he was a visionary. His name was Daniel Crown. But around the office, everyone just called him Crown. Partly because he insisted on it, partly because he treated us like subjects in his tiny kingdom. He loved power the way a drowning man loves oxygen. Desperately, obsessively, and with absolutely no self-awareness. I was one of his senior analysts, and to be fair, the job was good at first. Long hours, sure, but decent pay, interesting projects, and a team that genuinely liked each other. But Crown had a way of poisoning everything he touched. He wasn't loud or openly abusive, no. He was the kind of manager who smiled while he twisted the knife, gaslighting, undermining, manipulating. If he sensed weakness, he exploited it. If he sensed talent, he crushed it before it threatened him. I survived because I stayed invisible, or at least I thought I did. Everything changed when our biggest client, a tech startup on the brink of an IPO, hired us for a massive internal audit. It was the kind of contract that could elevate the firm from small player to industry name. Crown assigned me as the lead analyst. I spent 2 months working late nights, running models, double-checking numbers, building a report so airtight it practically breathed on its own. I should have known that doing good work was the most dangerous mistake I could make. The week before the final presentation, Crown called me into his office. Had never once invited me in before. Usually, he just barked orders from across the open floor. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. His desk was spotless. Crown was never tidy, and he was smiling too widely, like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. "Have a seat," he said, steepling his fingers like a cartoon CEO. "I want to talk about your future here." It took him less than 5 minutes to fire me. His excuses were vague. Alignment issues, performance concerns, strategic restructuring. But the real reason sat right there on his desk: my report. Printed, bound, with his name on the cover. He wasn't firing me. He was erasing me. I wish I could tell you I fought back, that I stood up and defended myself. But all I remember is a kind of numbness, like the world had been wrapped in cotton. I walked out with a cheap cardboard box holding my desk plant and a few pens, while Crown got to walk into that client meeting the next morning and present my work as his masterpiece. 2 months later, the company announced record profits. Crown became a minor celebrity in our niche industry, giving talks about leadership innovation. They even featured him in a business magazine, smiling with that same unnerving grin, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in my models. My friends from the office reached out quietly, offering condolences but refusing to get involved. I didn't blame them. Crown had power. I had nothing. Or at least that's what he thought. Because Crown didn't know something ID kept to myself. During the audit, ID discovered something unusual. A series of discrepancies that hinted at financial misconduct, not by the client, but by Crown himself. At the time, I didn't dig further. I was exhausted, overworked, and not interested in office politics. But after he stole my work, my job, and my professional reputation, let's just say I became very, very interested. I spent 6 weeks reconstructing everything from memory and from the files I had access to legally. And yes, only legally at that stage. The more I pieced together, the clearer the picture became. Crown had been siphoning funds from multiple contracts, subtly manipulating invoices, and burying the evidence behind layers of administrative errors. It was so elegant I almost admired it. Almost. The day I realized I had enough proof to bury him was the first night I slept well since being fired. But real revenge isn't about striking fast. It's about striking right. And I intended to do this perfectly. My first step was simple: disappear. Crown believed I walked out of his office that day and dissolved into obscurity. He thought he'd cut me off from the industry, from opportunities, from anyone who might listen to me. He assumed I'd either beg for a mediocre job somewhere else or spiral into bitterness. That was his first mistake. Instead, I took the little severance money he gave me insultingly small and rented a studio apartment on the far side of the city. I bought a whiteboard, 3 notebooks, and the cheapest coffee maker I could find. And then I started digging. Not into the company's servers. Not into anything illegal. Not yet. I dug into public records, financial disclosures, archived client statements, anything that was accessible to the average person, but meaningless to anyone except someone who knew precisely what to look for. Someone like me. 4 weeks, my life became a loop. Wake up, research, map everything out, try to connect threads, sleep for a few hours, repeat. Every day, the board on my wall grew more chaotic arrows, dates, numbers, patterns that only I could decipher. Every time I added something new, a sense of cold clarity washed over me. Crown wasn't just skimming money. He was diversifying his theft. Small amounts spread across different projects, slightly inflated consultant fees, administrative corrections, ghost subcontractors that existed only on paper. Always small enough to avoid raising alarms, too small for the clients to question. But across months years it added up. He wasn't bold. He was methodical. He was also sloppy in ways he didn't recognize. He reused patterns. He made the same rounding errors. He recycled invoice templates. Like most people who think they're geniuses, he overestimated his brilliance and underestimated everyone else. Then I hit the first gold vein. In the files ID helped generate for the audit, the same ones he later put his name on, there was a series of vendor IDs tied to technical evaluations. I never questioned them before. We outsourced small diagnostics to third-party analysts all the time. But one night, around 3 a.m., I ran the vendor ID through public business registries. The company didn't exist. The address was fake. The phone number went nowhere. It was a shell, one Crown created, and the name attached to it, a cousin of his, someone with debts, legal issues, and every reason to participate in a scheme like this. I wrote the name in big red letters on my whiteboard. I stared at it for a long time, not with triumph, but with something colder, something like inevitability. But discovering his fraud wasn't enough. I needed leverage, proof, something indisputable. I couldn't just walk into the authorities with a theory. Crown had influence. He had money. He had lawyers. And I had a cheap apartment and a bad coffee maker. So I needed someone else. Someone inside his kingdom. I started with my old co-workers. Carefully. Slowly. I didn't ask them for documents or accusations. That would have scared them off immediately. Instead, I reached out casually, under the guise of wanting to catch up. Some ignored me. A few cautiously replied. One of them, let's call her Ma, agreed to meet for coffee. We used to work side by side for 2 years. She was smart, ethical, and navigated Crown's moods with the precision of a bomb technician. When she walked into the cafe, she looked tired. More tired than I'd ever seen her at the firm. She hugged me longer than expected. You're not the only one, he pushed out, she said quietly. You were just the start. I didn't react. I let her talk. Apparently, after I was fired, Crown became worse. More paranoid. More controlling. The company was growing thanks to the audit ID done. But instead of stability, Crown seemed to spiral. He micromanaged. He fired people for minor mistakes. He blamed others for his own oversights. He started hoarding responsibilities because he genuinely believed he was the only competent person in the building. He scares people, Mara whispered, stirring her coffee. Not because he yells, Because he smiles and lies like he breathes. I asked her if anything seemed off. Financially, structurally, procedurally. She hesitated for a long time. Then she told me about the projects that never happened. Internal reports that didn't match the hours billed. Contractors no one met. Budgets adjusted at odd times, always signed off by Crown alone. The puzzle pieces fit perfectly. I didn't ask her for documents. That would have been reckless. Instead, I asked her a different question. Has Crown done anything recently that feels unstable? She laughed bitterly. He keeps talking about a keynote presentation he's giving next month. Some big industry conference. He's obsessed with it. Says it will cement his legacy. Has been working on it for weeks. A keynote. Public. Recorded. With all major clients attending. A perfect stage. Not for him, but for me. That night, I pinned a new card on my board. Conference. Under it, opportunity. My plan started to crystallize. I didn't need to expose him privately. I needed to expose him publicly. In a place where his reputation was currency and humiliation was permanent. But to do that, I needed undeniable, irrefutable evidence. Evidence Crown didn't know he'd given me. And I knew exactly where to find it. All I had to do was go back into the building I'd been fired from. Not physically, digitally, legally, not exactly. But justice doesn't always wait for permission. Breaking into Crown's digital world wasn't as hard as one might think. Not because I was some shadowy hacker with a hood and dramatic lighting, but because Crown had one fatal flaw. He believed he was untouchable. People who think they're invincible rarely bother locking their doors properly. I still had my old VPN credentials for a secondary internal channel that was used only during the audit. It wasn't tied to my employee account, just to a temporary guest access portal that Crown's team forgot to shut down, probably because they didn't even remember it existed. Why would they? Crown took credit for my audit work, which meant he never really understood how AD set up the analysis environment in the first place. My credentials still worked. Just like that, I was back inside. But I didn't touch anything unauthorized at first. I spent days carefully cataloging only what was accessible without digging to deep metadata. Timestamps, access logs. Enough to map a path without leaving footprints. Then I found it. A folder inside Crown's personal archive, titled Legacy Conferenstrend. Of course, he named it something dramatic. Inside were dozens of files, presentation slides, notes, rendered graphics, quotes he planned to use, and then, deeper in a subfolder, something that made me stop breathing for a few seconds. Expense spreadsheets. Some of the entries matched the discrepancies I'd uncovered. Identical invoice IDs, same fake vendor numbers, same pattern of rounding errors. He hadn't even bothered separating personal project files from company ones. My fingers shook as I scrolled through them. This wasn't just enough to expose him. It was enough to obliterate him. But evidence alone wasn't victory. Crown would claim it wasn't his doing, that someone tampered with his files. He'd find excuses, spin narratives, weaponize his confidence. A confrontation behind closed doors would only give him time to rewrite the story. I needed a stage, a spotlight, a moment he couldn't escape. And Mara had given me the perfect one. The keynote conference. I knew I couldn't just show up at the event and run on stage with accusations, like a conspiracy theorist. I needed the exposure to come from within the conference itself. I needed his downfall to be official, irreversible, public. So I contacted the event organizers. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't mention fraud. I simply emailed them a tip from an anonymous account, posing as a concerned employee. Daniel Crown will be presenting proprietary materials that are not his own. You should independently verify the integrity of his presentation files before the conference to avoid liability. That was all. Corporate events fear one thing more than scandals: lawsuits. They replied within an hour, asking for clarification. I gave none. The hook was set. 3 days later, the organizers contacted Crown's firm and requested all presentation files for security checks and intellectual property compliance. Crown, being Crown, complied immediately. He wanted to show off, after all, which meant the files he sent were the files he believed were safe. I had already replaced half a dozen of them. See, when I entered his archive, I didn't alter anything sensitive. I didn't touch numerical data or financial records. That would have been traceable. What I did alter was far more subtle. I replaced certain graphics in his keynote slides with enhanced versions of the spreadsheets, had been hiding screenshots of real invoices, fake vendor IDs, and financial mismatches. I embedded everything discreetly in the master slide template, tiny, almost invisible thumbnail layers that automatically expanded when the presentation was opened in a non-proprietary viewer. Layers the event organizer's software would reveal instantly. And they did. How do I know? Because 2 days before the conference, the organizers sent out a sweeping, carefully worded statement. All keynote materials would undergo additional forensic review due to an unspecified irregularity. Crown must have panicked. But he couldn't back out now, not from the biggest speech of his career. Not from the spotlight he'd spent months chasing. The morning of the conference, I arrived early and took a seat near the back. I wasn't hiding. Why would I? He didn't expect to see me. I was a ghost, a footnote in his mind. The auditorium filled. Hundreds of attendees murmured quietly, flipping through programs. Crown stood backstage, straightening his tie, wearing the same smug, suffocating smile I remembered all too well. Then the lights dimmed. The host introduced him with exaggerated praise, talking about innovation, leadership, forward-thinking, every buzzword Crown loved to hear. He stepped onto the stage beaming, soaking in the applause as though it were sunlight. He opened his presentation, clicked to the first slide, and froze. The audience didn't see it immediately. At first, the slide looked normal, but then the embedded layers triggered. The screen flickered and the tiny thumbnails exploded into full size. The auditorium went silent. Projected across a 50-foot screen were invoices with mismatched totals, fake vendor names, shell company payments, duplicated signatures, patterns of fraud mapped out clearly, unmistakably, evidence he had created, evidence in his own files, evidence he himself had submitted. Crown's face drained of color. He clicked frantically, but every slide revealed more. Hidden comments, metadata trails, payment logs, even the shell company registered under his cousin's name. The audience murmured, confusion turning to disbelief, disbelief turning to quiet outrage. Then someone yelled from the front row, "Is this a joke?" Another voice followed, "This is criminal." Security moved. Organizers rushed toward the stage. Crown dropped the clicker like it burned him. He tried to speak. He tried to blame sabotage. But every file displayed belonged to him. Every document came from his own account. Every trail led back to his signature. And I knew the final nail in the coffin had landed when a man in a dark suit and an event badge walked briskly toward the stage. He wasn't part of the conference staff. He was from the startup I'd audited their head of compliance. He climbed the steps, leaned in close, and whispered something into Crown's ear. Crown's legs buckled. He was escorted out, past the cameras, past the crowd, past me. He didn't even see me stand. In the following weeks, everything unfolded quickly. The firm launched an internal investigation. Multiple clients terminated contracts. Regulators got involved. His cousin was arrested first. Crown followed soon after. The fraud was too big, too obvious, too stupid to explain away. As for me, I got a call from the same startup, the one whose audit had stolen. Their CEO apologized for what happened. They offered me a job, a good one, leading a new internal integrity team. I accepted, not out of spite, not out of triumph, but because I wanted to build something again, something honest, something real. People ask me if I feel sorry for Crown. I don't. He buried himself. All I did was hand him the shovel.